There exists a dangerous misconception about history. The belief that people in past centuries simply accepted their suffering without question, without awareness that something was deeply wrong. This shallow view ignores an uncomfortable truth that residents of 1700s London understood all too well. The water they drank could kill them, and often did. Yet they had no choice but to drink it anyway. In a city exploding with population, commerce, and ambition, the most basic necessity of human survival had become a lethal gamble. This narrative is not a romantic portrait of Georgian elegance or industrial triumph. It is an account of something far grimmer. A city where the Thames flowed thick with human waste, where public wells drew from shallow groundwater contaminated by nearby cesspits, and where entire neighborhoods disappeared into mass graves during epidemics nobody understood. The story of drinking water in 1700s London is the story of invisible death, collective denial, and the painful evolution from ignorance to knowledge. The purpose of this narrative is not to sensationalize suffering or judge past generations by modern standards. Rather, it seeks to explore how ordinary people survived an extraordinary threat they could neither see nor comprehend. What daily choices did Londoners make when every water source carried risk? How did families navigate the cruel mathematics of hydration, drink and possibly die, or abstain and certainly die? And crucially, how did this sustained health crisis eventually force a reckoning with tradition, superstition, and the limits of human knowledge? Throughout this exploration, 6 central themes will unfold. First, the contaminated water infrastructure of 1700s London and why it became so deadly. Second, the human cost measured in epidemics, individual tragedies, and demographic catastrophe. Third, the survival strategies ordinary Londoners employed to reduce risk. Fourth, the medical and philosophical frameworks that prevented proper understanding of waterborne disease. Fifth, the early reformers whose observations began challenging established beliefs. And finally, the long-term transformation this crisis sparked in urban planning, public health, and scientific understanding. It is essential to acknowledge that this narrative examines a specific historical moment through evidence from contemporary accounts, medical records, mortality bills, and archaeological findings. The people of 1700s London were not primitive or foolish. They were intelligent human beings working within the knowledge systems available to them, applying logic and observation as best they could. Their tragedy was not stupidity, but circumstance, living in a time when the microscopic world remained invisible and the mechanisms of disease transmission were fundamentally misunderstood. The London of the 1700s was a city in transformation. Population surged from roughly 575, equal 0 in 1700, to nearly 1 million by 1800. This explosive growth overwhelmed existing infrastructure designed for a much smaller medieval city. Housing expanded rapidly, often without adequate sanitation planning. Wealth concentrated in certain districts, while crushing poverty defined others. And through it all flowed the Thames, serving simultaneously as water source, sewer, industrial dump, and transportation artery. What makes this period particularly significant is not just the suffering it caused, but the questions it forced. When traditional explanations failed repeatedly, when prayers did not stop epidemics, when wealth could not fully insulate anyone from waterborne disease, London was pushed toward uncomfortable truths. The crisis of contaminated water became more than a public health disaster. It became an epistemological crisis, challenging fundamental assumptions about health, urban life, and humanity's relationship with the natural world. This narrative will trace how necessity, desperation, and accumulated suffering gradually reshaped London from a death trap into the foundation of modern urban sanitation. The journey was neither quick nor straightforward. It required generations of observation, countless deaths, bitter political battles, and the painful abandonment of cherished beliefs. But the transformation, that began with Londoners questioning their water ultimately changed cities everywhere, creating systems of public health now considered fundamental human rights. Because beneath the statistics and infrastructure debates lived real people making impossible choices every day. Mothers boiling water over precious fuel, laborers trusting contaminated pumps because they had no alternative, children dying from illnesses their parents could not prevent or even understand. The story of surviving 1700s London is ultimately a story about human resilience in the face of invisible death and about how collective trauma can, eventually, forge collective progress. Understanding why London's water became so deadly requires examining the infrastructure that developed organically over centuries with no central planning or scientific comprehension of sanitation. The Thames was both lifeline and open sewer. Households and businesses dumped waste directly into the river or into tributaries feeding it. Tanneries, dye works, slaughterhouses, and breweries discharged chemical and organic refuse without restriction. Human waste from thousands of cesspits gradually leached through porous soil into groundwater that fed the very wells families drew from daily. Public pumps and wells dotted the city, often positioned at street corners for community access. These seemed like safe alternatives to river water, but geological reality made them death traps. Most wells were shallow, rarely exceeding 30 feet. In densely populated areas, cesspits and wells existed mere yards apart. The illusion of clear water emerging from underground masked microscopic contamination that medical science had no means to detect. Private water companies began operating in the early 1700s, using wooden pipes to distribute Thames water to paying customers. This appeared progressive, but the companies drew water downstream from where much of the city's waste entered the river. The New River Scheme, completed in 1613, brought fresher water from Hertfordshire, but served only wealthier districts. Poor neighbourhoods remained dependent on contaminated local sources. Londoners noticed their water often looked and smelled foul. They developed folk wisdom about which sources were better based on taste and appearance. Water that looked clear was trusted, though it might carry cholera. Water with visible sediment was avoided, though boiling it would have made it safer than clearer alternatives. These judgments, based on sensory observation rather than invisible microbial reality, created false confidence. The human cost manifested in waves of epidemic disease that swept through London with terrifying regularity. Summer diarrhea killed thousands of infants and children annually. What we now identify as cholera, typhoid, and dysentery appeared as distinct ailments with different names, but all shared waterborne transmission. The bills of mortality recorded deaths in categories like flux, griping in the guts, and bloody flux, documenting symptoms rather than underlying causes. Epidemics did not discriminate entirely by class, though poverty amplified risk. Wealthy families could afford spring water delivered from rural areas, could boil water using ample fuel, and lived in less crowded housing with better cesspit maintenance. But even aristocrats fell ill. When epidemics struck, entire households, from servants to masters, could succumb within days. The shared vulnerability created anxiety across all social levels, though the poor died in vastly greater numbers. Individual tragedies accumulated into demographic catastrophe. Infant mortality reached horrifying levels, with estimates suggesting that nearly half of all children born in poor districts died before age 5, many from waterborne disease. This normalized child death in ways modern minds struggle to comprehend. Families expected to lose children. Naming patterns reflected this. Children were often given the same names as deceased siblings. Survival in this environment demanded strategies born from observation, tradition, and desperate improvisation. Boiling water was understood to improve safety, though the reasons remained mysterious. Families with access to fuel would boil drinking water, especially for children and the sick. But fuel was expensive. Coal had to be purchased, wood was scarce in the city, and many poor households could not afford to boil all their water. They boiled selectively, rationing protection. Beer emerged as the safer alternative, not through understanding of sanitation, but through empirical observation that beer drinkers seemed healthier. The brewing process involved boiling, which killed pathogens, though no one understood why. Weak, small beer with low alcohol content became the standard beverage for all ages, including children. Breakfast often consisted of beer and bread. This was not drunkenness, but survival strategy disguised as cultural preference. Water carriers sold Thames water from door to door, claiming their sources were upstream and therefore cleaner. Some of these claims were genuine, others were fraudulent. Desperate customers had little way to verify. Spring water from rural areas commanded premium prices, accessible only to the wealthy. The poor made do with whatever they could afford or access freely from contaminated public pumps. Households developed superstitions and rituals around water. Some believed water drawn at certain times of day was safer. Others trusted water from specific wells with reputations for purity, often based on nothing more than local legend. These beliefs provided psychological comfort, but rarely corresponded to actual safety. The randomness of who fell ill and who survived reinforced these superstitions, as survivors attributed their luck to whatever practice they happened to follow. Medical theory of the era, dominated by miasma doctrine, focused on bad air rather than contaminated water. Physicians believed disease arose from foul-smelling vapors emanating from rotting organic matter. This was not entirely wrong. Decaying waste did correlate with disease, but it misidentified the mechanism. The focus on smell led to efforts to mask odors rather than eliminate contamination. Perfumes, herbs, and ventilation were prescribed, while the actual transmission through water went unrecognized. The miasma theory had profound consequences for water policy. Because water itself was not seen as a primary disease vector, little urgency existed to protect water sources from contamination. Efforts focused instead on removing waste from immediate proximity to homes and on improving air circulation. These measures provided marginal benefits, but failed to address the core problem. Generations would pass before the paradigm shifted, yet observation was accumulating. Some physicians noticed patterns. Diseases clustered around certain water sources, epidemics followed water distribution routes, and illness rates varied between neighborhoods in ways that correlated with water quality. These observations challenged prevailing theory, but lacked a framework for proper interpretation. Without germ theory, the mechanism remained invisible, and alternative explanations seemed equally plausible. Early reformers emerged slowly, driven by accumulated observation and mounting frustration with traditional explanations that failed to prevent recurring disasters. These were not revolutionary figures, but careful observers who noticed inconsistencies between theory and reality. They documented patterns, mapped disease outbreaks, and began questioning whether prevailing medical doctrine adequately explained what they witnessed. John Snow's famous 1854 cholera investigation in Broad Street came after the 1700s, but earlier observers laid groundwork. Physicians in the 1700s noted that neighborhoods sharing water sources shared disease patterns. They observed that epidemics often began near specific wells or water distribution points and radiated outward. These observations didn't yet overthrow miasma theory, but they planted seeds of doubt. Social reformers focused initially not on disease transmission, but on the moral and economic costs of urban squalor. They saw contaminated water as symptom of broader social failure, overcrowding, poverty, inadequate housing, and governmental neglect. Their campaigns for improved living conditions included demands for cleaner water, though still within the miasma framework. They sought to eliminate foul smells and visible filth, inadvertently addressing some actual contamination sources. Engineers began proposing infrastructure improvements, better sewers, protected water sources, pipe distribution from cleaner areas. These proposals faced resistance from property owners unwilling to fund construction, from water companies protecting profits, and from authorities skeptical that such massive investment was necessary. Incremental changes occurred, but comprehensive reform remained elusive throughout the 1700s. The economic argument gradually gained traction. Epidemic disease killed workers, disrupted commerce, and imposed costs on parishes responsible for burying paupers and supporting orphans. Business interests began recognizing that public health served private profit. This alignment of moral concern and economic interest created political momentum for change, though implementation remained frustratingly slow. What prevented faster progress was not just institutional inertia, but genuine intellectual barriers. Without microscopy capable of revealing bacteria, without germ theory, without statistical methods to rigorously test hypotheses, even careful observers struggled to move from correlation to causation. They saw that dirty water and disease coincided, but couldn't prove the mechanism. Alternative explanations, divine punishment, moral failing, atmospheric conditions, remained plausible within contemporary knowledge frameworks. The tragedy was that effective interventions existed before understanding was complete. Boiling water worked without anyone knowing why. Separating water sources from waste disposal reduced disease, even when miasma theory was invoked as justification. But without proper causal understanding, these measures were applied inconsistently, often abandoned when immediate crisis passed, and never systematized into comprehensive public health policy. London's water crisis was not solved in the 1700s. It continued into the 1800s, culminating in the Great Stink of 1858 and subsequent sewer construction. But seeds planted in the 1700s, accumulated observations, failed theories forcing reconsideration, growing recognition that tradition was inadequate, set the stage for eventual transformation. The experience of surviving 1700s London transformed not just the city, but the very concept of urban living. What began as individual suffering accumulated into collective knowledge that eventually reshaped how humanity thinks about public health, infrastructure, and governmental responsibility. The lessons learned through death and desperation became foundations for modern civilization. By the late 1700s, London's water crisis had reached a critical point where denial became impossible. Mortality rates remained stubbornly high, despite economic growth and medical advances in other areas. The cognitive dissonance between Britain's growing imperial power and its inability to provide safe drinking water in the capital became increasingly embarrassing. Intellectuals, physicians, and reformers intensified their demands for systematic change. The key conceptual shift was recognizing that certain problems cannot be solved individually. A family could boil their water, but if their neighbor's cesspit contaminated the shared well, individual precaution failed. This realization pushed toward collective solutions. Regulated water companies, enforced building codes separating wells from waste, and eventually, public infrastructure treating water and waste as community responsibilities rather than private concerns. This transformation was neither smooth nor inevitable. It required overcoming powerful opposition from those profiting from existing arrangements, from ideological resistance to government intervention, and from sheer inertia of established practices. Progress came through combination of factors: undeniable mortality statistics, economic costs of epidemic disease, embarrassment compared to continental cities implementing reforms, and gradual scientific advances making invisible contamination visible. The demographic impact cannot be overstated. London's ability to sustain population growth, despite horrific death rates, depended on constant migration from rural areas. The city consumed people, particularly children, at rates that would have caused population collapse without this influx. As water quality slowly improved through the late 1700s and into the 1800s, survival rates increased, changing the city's age structure and enabling genuine population growth rather than mere replacement of the dead. Knowledge developed in 1700s London spread globally. British engineers carried sanitation concepts to colonial cities. European observers studied London's failures and successes, accelerating reform in Paris, Berlin, and other growing urban centers. American cities watched London's struggles and attempted to avoid similar disasters, with mixed success. The lessons became international, shaping urban development worldwide. Modern readers might wonder how people tolerated such conditions. The answer lies partly in lack of alternatives. Where else could poor Londoners go? And partly in psychological adaptation. Humans normalize even terrible circumstances when they seem unchangeable. High child mortality became expected rather than exceptional. Periodic epidemics were feared but accepted as inevitable, like weather. Only when alternative possibilities became visible did tolerance transform into demand for change. The story of 1700s London's water challenges us to reflect on our own time. What invisible threats do we tolerate out of ignorance or convenience? What future generations will look back at our accepted practices with horror? And crucially, what crises must accumulate before collective action overcomes institutional inertia? The story of surviving 1700s London when drinking water could kill reveals fundamental truths about human progress. Change comes not from sudden enlightenment, but from accumulated suffering that finally becomes intolerable. The transformation from death trap to modern city required generations of observation, countless preventable deaths, and the gradual dismantling of cherished but false beliefs about disease and public responsibility. What made 1700s London's water crisis particularly instructive was its visibility. Unlike some historical catastrophes that struck suddenly and disappeared, contaminated water killed consistently, year after year, creating undeniable patterns that demanded explanation. The very persistence of the problem forced reckoning with inadequate theories and comfortable assumptions. When traditional medicine failed repeatedly, when prayers didn't stop epidemics, when wealth provided only partial protection, London was pushed toward harder truths. The practical lessons learned shaped modern urban civilization. Every city with treated drinking water, every building code separating waste from water sources, every public health department monitoring waterborne disease traces lineage back to London's painful education. The infrastructure we take for granted, the pipes, treatment plants, regulations, exists because earlier generations paid in blood for knowledge we inherited. But the deeper lesson concerns how societies learn. Progress required not just technical innovation, but conceptual revolution, recognizing that individual action cannot solve collective problems, accepting governmental responsibility for public health, trusting scientific evidence over traditional belief, and viewing infrastructure investment as moral imperative rather than optional expense. These were not natural or easy transitions. They were fought for, resisted, and only gradually accepted. For modern viewers, this history offers both comfort and warning. Comfort in seeing how far humanity has progressed. Clean water is now considered basic human right rather than luxury. Warning: in recognizing that progress is neither automatic nor permanent. Infrastructure degrades without maintenance. Scientific knowledge can be ignored when inconvenient. Collective responsibility can be abandoned in favor of individual interest. The mothers who boiled water over precious fuel, the physicians who documented patterns they couldn't explain, The reformers who demanded change before understanding mechanisms, the engineers who proposed solutions that seemed impossibly expensive, all contributed to transformation that saved countless lives. Their struggles remind us that the conveniences we enjoy were purchased through others' suffering and persistence. Surviving 1700s London meant living with invisible death, making impossible choices, and enduring losses that seem unimaginable today. But that survival also meant observing, questioning, demanding better, and gradually building the knowledge and systems that protect billions now. The water that once killed became catalyst for one of humanity's greatest collective achievements, learning to make cities livable. If this narrative resonates with you, share your thoughts in the comments. Like and subscribe for more historical explorations that connect past struggles to present understanding.